In this exercise, I'm going to show you how to move or otherwise transform objects that are either filled or stroked with tile patterns without affecting the tile patterns themselves. That way, if you have multiple overlapping objects that are all filled with the same tile pattern or similar tile patterns, as in our case, then you can do anything you want to the filled or stroked objects, and the tile patterns will continue to align with each other. I've saved my changes as colorvariations.ai. And currently I've got this central rectangle filled with the bronze men. I'm going to change that fill by switching it here in the swatches palette to troglodytes. And my fill's active, so I end up changing my fill here inside the illustration. Now I'm going to add a big circle with the ellipse tool, and it's going to provide us with a kind of magnifying glass into a different version of these troglodytes. And so I'll just drag while pressing the shift key in order to create this big circle like so, and then I'll release. And it comes in filled with the same tile pattern. I'm going to switch it over to the more colorful clubsters here. And then I'm going to increase my stroke weight to something like, let's start with 40 for starters. And it comes in as this sort of dingy gray. That's interesting. I'm going to click on this little stroke swatch and switch it to rich black. And then I'm going to increase the stroke value from 40 to, let's say, 44. And press the Enter key or the Return key on a Mac. And I'm going to add a drop shadow as well by going up to the Effect menu. And notice, because the stroke is active, I'll assign the drop shadow just to the stroke. So I'll go to Stylize, Drop Shadow. If you loaded D keys, you can press Control-Alt-E, Command-Option-E on the Mac. And these are the settings I want to apply. So multiply and opacity of 100%, X and Y offset set to 7 points apiece, and blur set to 0. That's just going to quicken things up so we don't have to spend a lot of time waiting for that Gaussian blur to resolve. And I'll turn on the preview checkbox, and that may be a little dark. Actually, let's take the opacity value down to 75%, let's say. Press the Tab key. That looks better to me. And I'll click OK. And now I want to add another stroke that contains yet another variation on this tile pattern. So I'll drop down to the Add New Stroke icon, click on it, or I could press Control-Alt/, Command-Option/ on a Mac. I'll change the stroke weight value to 40 points, so we'll have the effect of a 2-point black stroke on either side, because 44 points minus 40 is 4, split in half, we have 2 points on either side. And then I'm going to change that stroke from black to this final guy right there, bronze men. So we have this effect right here. Now then, notice how we have absolute and impeccable alignment between all of these guys inside the tile pattern. So one flows right into the other. And the analogy I make is to a very nice shirt. If you've ever got a pattern shirt that is tailored nicely, probably very expensive as well, then the idea is everything about that shirt should align when you button it up. And the same is true of these tile patterns. They should remain in absolute alignment no matter what we do. But if I drag this path to a different location, why then the stroke and fill are still in alignment because they're all part of the same object. However, they are not aligned with the background anymore because both of the tile patterns, both the fill and the stroke, got moved along with the object. If you don't want that, and I'm willing to bet most of the time you don't, all right, so I'll go ahead and press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac to go ahead and undo the movement of that path. Things get even worse if we try to scale the path. So if I press the S key to switch to the Scale tool, and I drag, for example, while pressing the Shift key in order to create a smaller circle inside of my illustration, why then I change everything. I scale the tile pattern. I also scale the stroke. Notice that. So it's become thinner. I've scaled both the strokes. So the top stroke is 26.5 points wide, and the bottom stroke's a little over 29 points wide. I don't want that at all. So I'll press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac to undo that change. And then I'm going to press Control-K or Command-K on the Mac to bring up the Preferences dialog box. And notice these two checkboxes, Transform Pattern Tiles and Scale Strokes and Effects. Effects meaning things like drop shadows and other dynamic effects. Let's go ahead and turn both of those checkboxes off and then click OK. And now notice what happens if I go ahead and scale this path outline. I don't change the line weight of the stroke, I don't change the size of the drop shadow, and I don't change the size of any of the elements in my tile pattern either, and everything still aligns perfectly. And if I switch back to the black arrow tool and then drag this path outline around, then you can see that everything remains exactly aligned. So I can say, you know what, I want to go ahead and inspect this upside down guy right here and check him out, and he's nice and purple now. And then I might inspect this guy who's on his side. He looks muted purple, but as soon as I release, he becomes orange, and so on. So I have that kind of control. If I drag over him, he becomes green, and so forth. So that's a function of turning those checkboxes off. I should show you that they also exist inside the independent transformation dialog boxes. So if I double-click on the scale tool, for example, then in addition to whatever changes I'm applying, I've got these two checkboxes. Notice scale, strokes, and effects, and patterns, and they're now turned off. And if I were to turn them back on, not only would I go ahead and scale the strokes and effects and the patterns like so, click OK, but I'd also modify if I press Control-K or Command-K on the Mac, I'd also change the settings here inside the Preferences dialog box. So they're both linked together. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and turn these guys off, click OK, and then I'm going to press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac to undo that modification. So that's how you move and otherwise transform path outlines that are filled or stroked with tile patterns without affecting the tile patterns themselves.